Welcome back to my channel. I am going to be sharing all of my 5-star reads for this year so far. I originally wanted to do an entire 5 stars video. However, I looked back at my Goodreads and I honestly questioned some of my ratings from last year, because last year is when I started to get back into reading and I think I was just really enjoying myself and I didn't really know how I wanted to rate books, and I started to get a little more critical as time went. But now I feel like I understand what is a 5-star for me, and I'm going to share that with you guys. So on my Goodreads, I have this like guide on how I rate my books. So my 5 stars for me are books I say change my life. And by change my life, what I mean is these books open me up to new things or have made me feel a lot of emotion. I have all of my physical books here that I have rated 5 stars. I am going to also be adding my 4.5 ratings, 4.5, 4.75 ratings in here as well, just because I don't have too many 5-star reads. The first book that I rated a 5-star this year was actually Love in Other Words by Christina. Honestly, I absolutely love that book. That book was the reason I started to get more into second chance romance. If you know, majority of my books that are second chance romances end up getting rated very high. I am just a sucker for second chance, and I truly believe it's because of my own relationship. My own relationship trope is a second chance romance, so I think that's why I love it so much. But that opened my eyes to second chance. I love that book. It was just so wholesome and sweet. Part of the reason I may have rated it a 5 is also because I read Every Summer After by Carrie a couple months before that, and they are books that are very comparable. With Every Summer After, I didn't like it as much, but I did still really like it, so I had to give Love in Other Words a 5-star rating. I just really loved it. So the next book I know a lot of people are going to be shocked about. I rated The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue 5 stars. This is by Schwab, and this is a historical fantasy. I believe it starts in the late 1500s. Basically, she makes a deal with darkness and she ends up being immortal and no one remembers her. A lot of people find this book to be very slow, and I definitely understand why. It is on the slower side. She isn't able to make connections with people because they're gonna forget her anyways, so I feel like you're almost put in her shoes. It's not for everyone because of how slow it is, but I really loved it. It was my first, I believe this is my first fantasy read this year, and my first fantasy in a really long time. The storyline and a lot of like underlying messages were just very beautiful, so I had to give it a 5-star. Now I know no one is shocked, but next with my 5-star reads I have Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home, and then I have Daisy Hates The Great Undoing. Obviously I don't have the first Daisy Hates here because I actually gave that a 4-star, but I gave all 3 of these ones 5 stars. I have talked about Magnolia Parks quite a few times, and I think I have actually cut out me mentioning Magnolia Parks in a lot of my videos because I was just like, I think they get it. You love Magnolia Parks. Again, I love second chance romance, so there is an element of second chance in these books. It is obviously more on the toxic side, a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms amongst these characters, but I just fell in love with these characters. I felt like they all were real and they were going through real life things. These are things that people actually deal with. I love Jessa Hastings' writing. She writes beautifully. It made me love this style of writing more, like the more poetic way of writing. The quotes in these books are amazing. I just love these. I actually started my reread of Magnolia Parks. I am not that far in. I'm obviously just gonna pick it up whenever I feel like it, but I already started my reread and I just read this I think in May or April, I can't remember. 5 stars for all 3 of these books. Next I have Happy Place by Emily Henry, and I know that this book has so many different reviews. I've seen people love this book or I've seen people just hate this book. I have read all of Emily Henry's other like popular books. I read Book Lovers, People We Meet on Vacation, and Beach Read, but none of them hold a candle to this book. This one, you can tell that Emily Henry's writing just improved a lot, at least in the way that I like books to be written. The poetic feel came out in this book. I felt it a lot and I loved it. I felt like it was also a relatable book. It touched a lot on things that adults deal with, like growing apart from friends, but not just growing apart, sometimes just not seeing friends as much anymore, but still having the same love and care for each other, outgrowing career paths, dealing with things like grief and all of that. There was so much in this book that is so relatable to pretty much every adult, I feel like. Also, you already know, second chance, and I also love fake dating. Those are my two favorite like romance tropes, and they were both in this book. I thought it was very unique to put two people that were once together in an experience where they had to fake date. I love this one so much. Next we have the ACOTAR series. So I just have the first 3 books here because I have so far only read these 3 plus the novella, and I'm currently reading A Court of Silver Flames. So I don't have my rating on that yet, but these 3 I gave 5 stars. Literally all 3 of these. Let me actually just start with the first one, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I had to give this one 5 stars because I was eating this book up. I loved every second that I was reading this. I know a lot of people say it's very slow in the beginning, but I didn't really find it slow to the point that I didn't enjoy it. I could just tell that the story was just building. There was a lot of world building at the beginning, but it was nothing that made me uninterested. I enjoyed it the entire time. This is the reason that I have officially become a romantasy reader. I love fantasy romance now. I want to get into more. I have so many on my list. I have so many sitting on my bookshelf that are just waiting to be read. I'm so excited to read more of these because this really opened my eyes. Like I said, I'm reading A Court of Silver Flames right now, and I keep thinking about reading both of these again because I loved them so much. Ever since reading these, I have a very hard time reading a simple rom-com. I still will read those. It just doesn't hit the same anymore now that I've read these. That's for sure, but they're still enjoyable here and there, but they don't hit the same ever since I've read these. I truly believe that A Court of Mist and Fury is my #1 book of the year. That's saying a lot because I've read plenty of books this year already, but I do think that this one is my favorite book of the year. It's the one book I haven't stopped thinking about. So those were all the books that I gave a 5-star rating to, but I did want to share with you guys my 4.5 ratings as well, because those books are just this close to being a 5-star read for me, but they do deserve recognition and they do deserve a little bit of the spotlight, so I wanted to share these. So the first one would be Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Besides The 7 Husbands, I think this is like my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book. The same feeling I felt when reading The 7 Husbands, I felt with this book, wanting to search up the character as if they were real. I really enjoyed it. I loved Carrie Soto. I feel like although she was a character that was meant to come off very rude, and she did have her moments, it was almost like with the media, she could never win. Next, I have Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. I give this a 4.5 simply because the end just completely did it for me. There are a lot of romances that I have a really hard time accepting how they ended or wanting more from the characters, but this one closed up the character story so well. This is another second chance. Usually with second chance romances, we have the whole past and present timeline. We go from past and present with alternating chapters, but this one had, I think, like 3 different sections. We experienced the present for a little bit, we went to the past, and then we got back to the present. This was about 2 friends from college. They were really good friends. Eventually started to explore their connection, and something ends up happening where they don't talk for like 15 years and they bump into each other later on in life. I loved how it was done. It definitely deserved more than just a 4-star, but it just wasn't quite the 5. Lastly, one of my most recent reads, I have Legendary by Stephanie Garber, and this is part of the Caraval trilogy. This is the second book, if I didn't mention. I don't want to get too into it, but Caraval is simply this game that is pretty much orchestrated through magic the entire time. There's a lot of illusions. You don't know what's real. In the first book, we have Scarlet, and she goes to Caraval and she finds out that the game is about her sister. But Legendary brings us back to Caraval, but this is in Donatella's point of view, and Donatella is Scarlet's sister. This one was just so much more interesting, and she also meets the Prince of Hearts in this book. If you didn't know, the Prince of Hearts is the main male character in Once Upon a Broken Heart. So I really wanted to read this first before getting into Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I'm so glad I did, because now I know a lot more about Jax before getting into that one. I'm sure it wouldn't make a huge difference. I feel like it might just make me have more of an emotional connection to the character, having seen and read his background story. So I gave this one 4.5. I rated this one the highest out of the 3 books. I just remembered I do have one other book that I gave a 4.5, and I read that on my Kindle, which was Part of Your World by Addie Jimenez. I loved that book so much. I already went back and reread the first couple chapters. It was a small town romance that had an age gap as well. They both had very different lives, and they were trying to navigate their relationship and their feelings. It was just such a fun romance. I haven't enjoyed a simple romance like that in a long time. It was my first Addie Jimenez book, and she already impressed me, and I'm ready to read all of her books after reading that one. That was all of my 5-star reads for this year so far, plus my 4.5s as well. I had to give them recognition because they all still stick with me to this day. I know some people on my Bookstagram were asking me to share my 5-star reads for this year, and that was all of them. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any other video ideas that you want to share with me, please leave them in the comments below, or you can message me on my Bookstagram as well. I've been very active on there. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.